Hello, I'm Russell Berner, a councilman for the town of Kiawah, and I wanted to welcome you to the next podcast here that we're showing to the community. I am here with Collie Farah from the Kiawah Conservancy, as well as Natalie Olson from the Lowcountry Land Trust. So I'm so happy that you guys are here because, as you guys know, I was at the last Johns Island Task Force meeting, and the two of you presented a fabulous PowerPoint, which really impressed me about all of the work that you guys have been doing with preserving the land within this area. So I wanted to have you guys have the opportunity to tell the community members here at Kiawah all of the great things that you have accomplished. So, or what your organizations have accomplished. So, Collie, can you first then introduce yourself and tell me what you are doing with the Kiawah Conservancy?
Certainly. Well, first off, thank you for having us. This is a great opportunity to be able to connect with the community, tell everybody about our work and our ongoing projects and the teamwork and the collaboration between Lowcountry Land Trust and our organization. But my name is Collie Farah. I'm the land preservation specialist for the Kiawah Conservancy. So my main goal at the Conservancy, or my main tasks, are to locate properties for conservation, whether that be through a conservation easement, whether it's a land donation, or even purchasing properties. I'm out there to identify those properties, connect with those landowners, and find a way to conserve that land ultimately.
Wonderful. Yeah. And Natalie, this is your chance now to brag a little bit about yourself and the Lowcountry Land Trust, if you could please introduce yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having us. Like Collie said, this is a great opportunity to connect with the community and share what kind of work we're doing. So the Lowcountry Land Trust was formed in 1986. We operate in 17 coastal counties, and we work primarily on conservation easements and land protection projects. And we have over 150,000 acres under easement along the coast of South Carolina.
That's amazing.
Which is a big number, and it's growing every year, which is just fantastic. And so the Lowcountry Land Trust formed my position a couple of years back to focus solely on the Sea Islands. So I am the Lowcountry Land Trust Sea Island Program Director, and so I focus mostly on Johns Island and Wadmalaw, and a little bit on the surrounding area. And I do a lot of what Collie does, identify conservation projects. I work with landowners on conservation easements. We purchase property. We were our organization was born here on Wadmalaw and Johns Island and in the Sea Island area. And so we're really investing in trying to make some progress on the Sea Islands in the face of all of the growth. So just excited to be here.
Great. That's a great introduction. And you stole already my third question, but I'm glad you did. But I was going to ask, how did you guys, your organizations meet and get together? And are there any specific goals that you have in the short term of what you're trying to achieve?
Yeah.
Collie, I guess it's your turn.
Sure. Well, historically, the Conservancy's been around for over 26 years now, the Kiawah Conservancy. To date, we've got over 3,860 acres preserved on and around Kiawah Island. So that includes Johns Island, Seabrook, and the surrounding areas.
So 380?
3,860 acres.
Wow.
Yeah. So we've made some tremendous progress over the past 26 years. Historically, we worked really just on Kiawah Island, but it was our new strategic plan that we adopted back in 2019 that brought us not just onto Kiawah, but expanded our focus onto Johns Island. We certainly still, Kiawah is a priority. We'll always be here, won't ever leave. We're just expanding our focus a little bit. And we fit well with Lowcountry, who's been doing this work for a long time on Johns Island. But our Conservancy recognized that it was important to expand our conservation efforts. At our heart, we're a wildlife organization, so that's what all of our land protection is centered around. We recognize that wildlife does not know boundaries, right? We, as humans, we might make these municipal jurisdictions and boundaries, but wildlife don't know those boundaries, and they travel to and from Johns Island to Kiawah, vice versa, each and every day. So it's just as important to protect the land on Johns Island as it is Kiawah. And Lowcountry is really one of the reasons we branched out as well, in that it's a big island to protect, and areas like Betsy Carrison and the southern end of River Road are right outside of Kiawah's Gate and a great starting point for the Conservancy to kind of introduce ourselves into Johns Island. And I think we work really, really well together. Like I said, Johns Island's a big area, so if we can kind of work together in tandem and maybe like squeeze, if you will, Johns Island into conservation, I think we have a great approach because the Kiawah Conservancy, our focus is really up toward Plowground Road and down. So we follow the watershed approach, the local watershed of Kiawah Island. And so anything that happens in that area ultimately affects Kiawah and vice versa. And so that's kind of how we strategize our land protection.
Great. So there's a trend here. You both keep answering the questions before I get there. So but it's wonderful. But Natalie, I just wanted to then go back to you. Collie referenced how important land is with respect to the animal habitat. Can you expand as to why it is also very important for the environment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so we have a similar mission, but it's a little bit more focused on connecting people to places and protecting places that we love. And so, but it's, the same concept that our community, especially the Sea Islands community, relies on open spaces and green spaces. We have the best food in the country. This is a phenomenal place to visit. There's so many wonderful places on the Sea Islands to go, but all of those rely on having green space, having wildlife, having farmland, and with the development pressure and everybody wanting to move here, it's hard to keep those things as uses on the land.
And there's a recent development we were talking before the podcast started that there is some there is some contamination in the rivers here that is affecting the oyster harvesting. Is there anything that you can talk about with respect to that?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a whole bunch of information about what impacts water quality, but I mean, in its very simple terms, we know development impacts water quality. Yes. We know, the pesticides that we put on lawns, we know septic tanks, all of that. What comes along with development is impact to water quality. Right. And the flip side of that is that land protection protects water quality. So every project that we're doing whether it's uplands, whether it's wetlands, whether it's waterfront, if we're not developing it, then that is a way to enhance and protect the water quality. And so those are the filtration systems and the storage systems for all the water that the oysters are relying on. And so to the extent that we're having development out here, which, a good chunk of the island is developed and we've got development on Kiawah, we need to balance that with natural areas for the water to recharge, for groundwater to recharge. And so it's an important balance. And I think that's hard, like Collie said about parceling out boundaries. We have municipal boundaries, we have parcel boundaries, we have tens of thousands of different landowners on Johns Island alone. And it's hard to do large enough scales to balance out the development that is happening out here. But that's what we're trying to do, because those are so important for protecting the things that's bringing everybody here in the first place.
And great, perfect answer. Thank you so much for that, because it's a perfect segue now into the next question. And I wanted to ask you, Collie, so what are the steps that you go through in order to acquire the land? It's either purchased or it's donated. So what are the steps that you go through?
Yeah. So it's different with every property and every project. I'll start with Kiawah in particular. We break it down whether it's owned by the Conservancy or a conservation easement. And to date, we've got 77 properties, and that's broken up between, I'm pretty sure, 18 conservation easements and 50-something fee simple owned properties, whatever the simple math there is. But with the typical property that's on Kiawah, we don't necessarily go out and purchase those lands. Historically, the Conservancy's been lucky enough to be donated certain properties on Kiawah Island. And then also, as far as the large tracts go with the marshes and the hummock islands and some of the higher areas like Little Bear Island on the east end of Kiawah, those are conservation easements. Both those processes are a little different. But with a conservation easement, what that is, it's an agreement with the landowner and the land trust, where the landowner still retains ownership of that property, but we just restrict it from certain developments and so forth. When we acquire lands through donation, we put deed restrictions on those properties, making sure that they'll be protected in perpetuity. And that's important to highlight, that everything that we do in conservation is in perpetuity, so it's forever, which is a great thing. As far as the process for each, like I said, they're different, but it's pretty straightforward in that we go out, we do a habitat assessment of the properties. We then that's to locate what conservation values are there. And then what we do is then put that before our various committees and ultimately our board to vote whether we would pursue a conservation easement or the donation of that property.
Got it. Wonderful. So, so we've discussed the need for preserving land, and we discussed how the land is acquired. Before we get into some of the other slides that show how much land that you have obtained, I wanted to have you guys both of you have the opportunity to really brag about the things that you have done in your respective organizations. So, Natalie, I would like you to we're talking about conservation of land. What other conservation projects have you been working on that you'd like the community to know about?
Where do I even start?
They've set the bar real high over there at Lowcountry.
Well, maybe just the top 2 or 3 then.
Yeah.
So
you know, I've been fortunate since I started this position to work with close to a half a dozen landowners on fully donated conservation easements. And that it's a much simpler process than purchasing property or applying for grant funds. And those situations, I closed 2 easements last year on Wadmalaw Island, which we can get into the successes on Wadmalaw generally in a little bit, but you know, it's really been a pleasure to work with the landowners that I have because they want to do it. You know, they want yes. to protect their property, whether it's something they want to pass down to their children, or if they don't have children, then they want to have a lasting impact on this community. It's a way to put a footprint, you know, in the ground that will last forever. Like Collie said, it's perpetuity. And so talk about legacy. I mean, that's the best way, in my opinion, to, you know, establish and preserve a legacy. So I think that's been one of the funnest parts about this. And one of the best kind of successes is that I've had a number of landowners that have approached us and say, I want to protect my property. Help me do that. And the Land Trust, we have a couple of different public access projects, which are really exciting. One that I can't not mention is the Angel Oak Park.
About that.
That's a property that Lowcountry Land Trust has been working with partners in the community on for a very long time. And we're in the stage of designing the park and starting construction, and we're going to get the gates open at some point soon. So it's a remarkable place. It's a remarkable tree, and it carries with it a lot of the history and culture. And so we're very excited to have that one open to the public.
Can you tell the community what that project entails? I know the answer, Ed, was I observed the renderings, but it's you're upgrading the Angel Oak location with putting in boardwalks and learning centers and such. Can you take the opportunity to explain that?
Actually, I'll give a little bit of a teaser, and then I'll recommend that you have on Samantha Siegel, Angel Oak Preserve Director, to talk more about the park at a future podcast, because I would love to share that information as widely as possible, and I'm not the best person to be sharing the details. But yes, that's absolutely right. The Angel Oak was sort of historically on a very small parcel with a chain link fence around it. And there was a development that was proposed to build condos around the whole Angel Oak. And there's a lengthy and kind of complicated history there. But today we own the 34 acres or so that are around the tree. And so it will be, we're taking down the chain link fence. And there is a huge amount of effort that's going into making sure that the history of that property and the history of the Sea Islands is told through your experience going to the park. And so it's going to be an enormous asset to the community and to visitors and everything. And so I encourage you that would be a
great idea.
Conversation because there's
definitely going
awesome
to look
plans
into that.
there.
So Collie, your chance to brag then and show off for not just you, but also the Kiawah Conservancy.
Yeah.
So what else have you been working on?
Would love to. I would like to take a second just to kind of highlight the full scope of what our organization does. First off, I think it's really unique that Kiawah Island in itself has its own land trust, with its roots being here with a goal of preserving all the land that it can on Kiawah. And then, expanding our efforts has just opened the floodgates to opportunity. But we're not just a land trust for protecting land. Well, we have a great research center with Lee Bundrick, who heads up most of our research on the island. We do a lot of public outreach, education, communication with the community, trying to spread awareness and the importance of land conservation, but just also the importance of the environment and what role it plays here for us, because we all love the Lowcountry. We all came here for a reason, and that's the natural environment and the wildlife. But there's so much that goes into it, and there's so much to monitor, so much to protect, to make sure that the reason we all came here and love being here remains for generations to come.
Absolutely.
And so I think we've done a really good job of expanding all of our work that goes just beyond land conservation, but the finer details within. As far as some recent successes too, I'd like to highlight what we've been doing on Johns Island.
Please.
And so our initial focus has been along Betsy Carrison Parkway, which I think the community well knows has been hit hard with development pressures. And so, between Lowcountry and us, we're the only organizations out there kind of working to conserve that land. If not us, then, developers will come in and develop those lands. So to date, we've acquired 2 properties along Betsy Carrison Parkway. One is where former Rosebank farm stand was, and then the other property is almost directly adjacent to it. And then we just got under contract and we'll close this summer on the middle parcel. So that'll be 3 areas of, creating contiguous land preservation along Betsy Carrison Parkway that will be preserved for wildlife habitat, first and foremost. But we also have the opportunity to incorporate public access there. So it will be a public park that people can go and walk the trails, learn about the native flora and fauna that's in the area. We will have a native sweetgrass demonstration farm on where Rosebank Farmstead used to be. We might even have some local basket weavers having their stands out there. And as Natalie mentioned, it's connecting people to the land. And that's what we see with these properties that we've acquired on Betsy Carrison, is it's getting people to embed themselves in the nature, connecting them with the natural environment. And we see it all too often when development pressures come in, it takes away that rural and that cultural nature that defines the area.
Came here in the first place.
Exactly. So important to protect it, but also find opportunities for the public to enjoy it. And so we hope to have that I'll call public park system right there on Betsy Carrison open within the next couple of years for people to go and enjoy, hopefully sooner, but we'll see how the progress goes.
Looking forward to that. Excellent job.
Thank you. I did mention the Sweetgrass Farm,
You did.
that demonstration one. I would like to take just a quick second to highlight the Conservancy's initiative to establish a separate Sweetgrass Farm that's on Johns Island. When we were first getting out to Johns Island, as Natalie knows, you have to connect with the community. You have to learn the needs, the wants, the desires, and the concerns of that community. And one thing that we learned was that sweetgrass is becoming harder and harder for the local basket weavers to get a hold of, because where it grows naturally is in the dune systems, salty areas like the marsh edges, and those areas are becoming more and more privatized because they're desired land to live on. And so we thought, well, how can we help keep the sweetgrass around? And so we went out to the local dune systems of Kiawah Island and harvested sweetgrass seeds from those dune systems, grew them at a local nursery on Johns Island, and to date we have 1,400 sweetgrass plants in the ground. We thought it would take 3 years before they'd be ready for harvest, but we actually are way ahead of schedule, and we had our first harvest 2 weeks ago. And so we went out there, harvested those plants, and then we set up a distribution to where we were able to give away sweetgrass to the basket weavers of Johns Island and even Mount Pleasant, and trying to serve the whole Lowcountry area. I think between 60 and 80 basket weavers were able to come out and get some sweetgrass. And so
That's so wonderful.
it's been a wonderful, wonderful project to watch mature and come to life, and it's really helping the community. But that's what it's about. We're here, our organizations are here for the community, and it's not just the wildlife community, but the human communities as well.
It's a great message.
Yeah.